Let's return to Nimzowitsch and his original comment that the passed pawn is a criminal that should be kept under lock and key. What this basically means is that passed pawns must be blockaded by the defender, or at any rate that's a very good defensive idea to take on board. You put one of your pieces in front of the passed pawn to stop it dead in its tracks, and you hope thereby to create counterplay by playing around the passed pawn. A very good example of this idea was seen in the game Roland Bayen versus Jacques Chiaramonti. This game was played in the Havana Olympiad in 1966. I'm choosing these old games, these unfamiliar games, because I often feel they're overlooked. This is an excellent example of how a passed pawn can be halted. The opening is a 4 pawns attack in the King's Indian, quite an exciting variation. When white plays like this, he really sets out his stall early. He wants to advance those pawns at the right moment and create an attack. And black plays a very old-fashioned variation in this game, pawn to e5. Not thought to be very good, but it works well here. These days, almost exclusively, black plays either c5 or knight to a6, an options preserving variation. e5 is very committal, and Bayen plays what is thought to be the best way. He takes on e5 with the f-pawn and now pawn into d5, which looks as though it establishes a very strong wedge in black's position. c5. So what is black doing here? He has voluntarily given white a strong supported passed pawn in the centre. Well, black is basically hoping that pawn isn't going anywhere, and by manoeuvring a knight to d6, as I've indicated, he blockades the pawn. If a black knight gets to d6, it's blockaded. After that, black can look for counterplay, probably with a move f5, very much in his sights. So white has to demonstrate something against this plan. Despite the fact he's got a passed pawn, it might well be just stopped and have to stay there for the whole game. So bishop e3. I think bishop g5 is probably a stronger move here, because not only does that pin the knight, if black wants to go through with his plans, he's got to make concessions here, h6 and g5, weakening your king side a little bit. And if bishop g3, knight takes e4, with black trying to solve his problems using tricks, then I think the rational d3 is good. And if we capture, white recaptures, and he's got a nice grip on the position. Not only has he got a strong passed pawn now, he's got serious pressure against black's weak pawn on e5 and strong control of the light squares. So this is very unfavourable for black. Bishop e3. Okay, Bayen doesn't think much of bishop g5, prefers another move. Knight bd7. Another move I don't especially like. I mean, I think knight a6 is a better move here, for sure. Let's just take a look at it. Because it helps black to play the knight round to d6. And after bishop e2, I think black could play knight d6. He could even get on with f5 straight away. This is quite a reasonable position for black, and preferable than the game, because the black knights are doing independent jobs. After knight bd7, it seems to me that maybe black's knights could get in a little bit of a tangle here. Nevertheless, it's reasonable for black now, as after queen d2, knight g4, bishop g5, f6, bishop h4, black has some counterplay coming up. And note, if white castles on the queen side at the wrong moment, bishop h6 can strike him down. That's why black figures he's got a timeout to play a6, h3, which a6 is also quite useful, because if a black knight ever reaches d6, it's impossible for white to budge that knight by playing knight b5. Castles on the queen side, knight f7, and again white's got to take a little time out of his own by playing king b1, because, of course, if d6 here, bishop h6. White's got to be very careful about advancing that pawn. So it's going to take him a long time to get that pawn mobilised. So king to b1, and now here we are, right on time. Black puts his blockading knight on d6. So the position is pretty good for black. I mean, if you could get this position with black against this variation all the time, I think many more players would play e5. g4 was played by white. Black played rook b8. thinking about b5, and now it all starts to get a little bit fishy for white as he advances pawns in front of his king. I think around here, Bayern was starting to lose the thread. With that knight on d6, he can't really see what to do. And black, meanwhile, has a kind of ready-made attack on the queen side if he can get b5 in, which is exactly what Chiaramonte does now. So the pace of the game is picking up, and black is thinking about the attack. Well, white's got to take that pawn. Knight comes to b6, b3, bishop d7. All of black's pieces come into the game, and white tried knight a4. Knight b takes c4, a very good move. What is white to do? If he takes on c4 with the bishop, we take with our knight. Black is happy to give up his blockading knight in this position to open up the white king. White didn't like that. He took off the queens and took on c5. And black played bishop takes b5. What I don't like about this position from white's perspective is that black has been allowed to maintain his blockading knight, which really exerts now a tremendous influence on the position. King a2, getting his king off the file, was answered by rook fc8. White took on b5, black recaptured, rook to c1. I don't know if that was a blunder or not, but well, it's getting hard to see moves, isn't it, for white, because his entire pawn structure is under pressure from that black knight and black's pressure on the b file. Bayern tries to bail his way out with tactics. b4. Black has seen his way through it. Rook c3. After b takes a5, all white could do now was to play for cheapos. Black has the position under control. The blockading knight takes on e4. Rook takes a6. g5. Bishop e1 only move. Rook e3. And look at that, complete domination of the bishop. Rook c6. Rook takes e1. These moves are not strictly necessary. Rook a3 is now a threat. Bishop d6. White tries another cheapo. Beautiful. Black has it all under control tactically to the very end of the game. White resigns. As king takes a3 is answered by knight b5 check. Black wins the pawn and has ample material advantage on the king side. So that was a very good example of how, if the passed pawn is blockaded, quite often a player can run out of steam with ideas. Bayern seemed to have a good position, but the knight on d6 really stopped him from doing anything at all which was meaningful. So just to summarise this section on passed pawns can be strong, they can also be weak. They tend to become stronger as the endgame approaches. In fully fledged middle game positions, you know, it might not mean anything when the passed pawn is blockaded, as we saw in this instructive game.